Well, I'd say one legend and then me. But so I appreciate that. First of all, really, what a great day. That last panel was just amazing. And the women really, really impressive what they're doing. And I think we've managed to put together a good first day of our first inaugural conference, John. So I'll give us a little pat on the back for now, but very, very excited to have you here. This will only be the 1700th time we've done something like this, but thank goodness Diane and Cinnamon are here to keep us company and watch us. John, I mean, listen, as I have said repeatedly, there are very few people who have been as innovative in the marketing ecosystem as you have been. And for those of you who don't know, not only did John create, and he'll say with the team, but John create the Pepsi Challenge. Not only did John figure out that the 2-liter bottle could change the game. Before John, every soda was sold in a little container. Now we can get vats of soda, which if you go to any movie theater you can get, or at a 2-liter bottle. John then rolled out. We just had the amazing CMO of E-Trade. I was telling her how much I love the puppy monkey baby. But John effectively created the concept of big Super Bowl marketing with the Apple 1984 ad, the launch of the Mac. That commercial, I believe, only ran once and then got billions of dollars in free marketing by being replayed billions of times. He then was famously asked, did he want to sell sugar water for the rest of his life or come with Steve Jobs and change the world, which has now been documented in multiple feature films with multiple major actors, none of which are as handsome as you, by the way. Jeff Daniels is close, but you're much better looking than them. John, what's the future of marketing?
Well, I think the future of marketing really can be well understood by what's happened over the last 18 months with the pandemic. And the reason I point to that is because the thing that I have admired, particularly in this country, because it's deep in our culture, is that, of course, we all love innovation. We define our culture in the U.S. Is that we live to work. You know, I have a brother who lives in Europe, and he doesn't really know what his neighbors in France do, even though they've lived next to each other for 15 years, because they work to live. And so we have turned work into something that we feel is part of our culture, something we admire. Well, not only are we incredibly innovative in this country, but we see so many immigrants have come to the United States and are leading some of the most innovative companies. So there's something in the water here. There's something here. It isn't just where you were born. It's when you come to this country. And I believe that what we saw in the last 18 months is what I describe as adaptive innovation. I've always been a big believer in not just inventing something, not just being a great innovator, but adapting it to be able to give you something you can build with. And clearly we've seen in this country during the last 18 months this incredible ability of people to take things. The technology was there before 18 months ago, but they've adapted it in so many incredibly creative ways.
What's a great example, John? When you think of adaptation, I mean, obviously we are all here in some way, shape, or form because of it as a species. But when you think about technology, well, I shouldn't say that. I believe that.
Well, I think the obvious example is what's happened with video. Whether it's Zoom video or one of the other competitive services, we have all learned how to keep going and get along and actually work in different ways virtually. So Diane and I, my wife and I are business partners as well as husband and wife, and we would travel all over the world.
She's definitely the senior partner.
Are you kidding? Absolutely. And the smarter one. Diane's an electrical engineer and a mathematician. And so we would travel all over the world. So most of the time we were traveling. Well, during the pandemic, we haven't gone anywhere, but we've gone everywhere, virtually. And if you look at what's happened in healthcare with telehealth, it's now becoming the first experience choice more and more with physicians and nurse practitioners. So that the first person you'll see probably more and more from a healthcare standpoint will be a virtual health
Will we have to
expert.
wait an hour in the waiting room before they see us?
Well, that was the frustrating thing. You had to wait for the in-person visits. So I think that we've learned how many businesses have become increasingly more successful. Digital marketing that we've all been talking about today, there was just example after example, David, of just incredibly successful companies that adapted over the last year. So what has happened? Everybody is doing better. The economy is booming, right now, and there's no indication that it's going to slow down. And a lot of it is coming from innovation, and it isn't just in the United States, but it's something that leverages one of our great strengths, which is adaptive innovation.
When you think about digital marketing, right? So there's a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot of sort of flight to it or move to it. Obviously, we'll try not to make this an infomercial, but it's the single biggest thing we do at Zeta Global is digital transformation. We've talked a lot today about not wasting a crisis, right? And whether you give credit to Machiavelli or Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. How do you see the emergence of that? So, meaning, what's the next big digital marketing thing, in your opinion?
Well, I get the opportunity to hang out with a lot of really smart people trying to figure those types of questions out. And what I can tell you is everyone is focused now on the rollout of 5G, and of course, that's exciting, and it's going to give us improvements over what we've had prior to that. But the expectations in the world with people who are looking at, so what comes next, is that no sooner will we get 5G rolled out, but 6G is going to already start appearing. So originally people thought that 6G would start happening after 2030. More realistic, 6G will probably start happening sometime after 2025. So that's not that far away. So you say, well, what's the difference between 6G and 5G? Well, the big difference is that we'll go from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Everything. That the speed and the cost of doing things through connectivity, a big theme of the panels today, is only going to get better and better. So if you think back to what was a video experience like 2 or 3 years ago, and what is a video experience like now? Well, with the advent of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we have moved from the world that I grew up with in high tech in the early days of video, which was called a codecs, a compression-decompression algorithm. We no longer need codecs.
When you grew up, you had online video?
When I grew up, in meaning figuratively. I'm still growing up. But now we have something called upscaling. And an upscaler uses machine learning, and it uses artificial intelligence to take relatively low, moderate quality video and be able to scale it to the highest definition that you could imagine, meaning even better than the source video that was taken. Well, just think of the implications of that for digital marketing. It means that you'll be able to get much, much higher presentations of products and services. The experience that a consumer will have digitally will be significantly better. Look back at, if you can remember when you were very, very young, of what television looked like, and then look at what television looks like, when it's running over Fios, or which is what we have in New York City for the most part, and it's just night and day. Well, we're going to get at least that level of improvement in terms of video, in terms of imaging, in terms of the way we can be able to show products and services from a digital advertising standpoint. And the costs are going down dramatically. So if I were in the digital content business, I would say, I've got to be able to adapt to probably an order of magnitude, that's a factor of 10, improvement in the quality of the experience that people will have in digital, not by 2030, but probably sometime between 2025 and 2030. So it's coming relatively quickly. And you could take other examples, but I just picked that as one.
Well, that's a pretty good one. Let's talk about some of the things that enable what you just talked about. I'm going to start with sensors, and I'm going to end with augmented reality. But when you think about sort of supply chain, disruptions, digital marketing, moving the experience up by 10 times over the next 3 to 5 years, how do you think sensors, back to your sort of declining cost question, how do you think sensors change, well, I hate to say everything because it might sound a bit contrite, but how do you think sensors...
Well, I can tell you how I think about it. When I arrived in Silicon Valley, most people had never heard of a personal computer before. And Steve Jobs asked me to come and be his partner because he was being criticized because people in Silicon Valley thought computers were only for scientists, engineers, business people. They couldn't understand what Steve was talking about when he said the future of computers is going to be for people to be able to do amazing things and be incredibly easy to use. And so he was ridiculed in those days, back in the early 1980s, for what was called the Steve Jobs reality distortion field. Well, the reality distortion field turned out to be what we all observe today. And it was all because of something called the microprocessor and Moore's law. And we're the beneficiary of that because processors got faster and faster, doubling in the number of transistors you could put on a given wafer scale about every 18 to 24 months. Well, I use that story as a context to how to think about sensors, because sensors are going to get better and better and better. And it isn't just the physical hardware of the sensor. That's relatively simple technology. The more important part is what's driving it from a software and algorithmic standpoint. And so it means that we're going to find that sensors are going to be able to track everything. They'll be able to watch everything. Raises some big issues about surveillance and the storage of that type of data and the permissions of that. So if we think we have issues today with Facebook and what's being captured by things that we volunteer to put on Instagram, we haven't even come close to what's, from a technology standpoint, is going to be possible. And sensors are going to be capturing a lot of that data. They'll do a lot of good things as they move into the field of healthcare. And if you think of the healthcare system today, it's basically a sick care system. About 85% of the spend is on helping people who are sick get better. The future of healthcare is more about preventative care, because it turns out that about 70% of chronic care diseases are actually reversible. And so if you could be able to use sensors to track and do things that people don't even may be aware of or don't have the habits yet to do on their own behavior, sensors are going to do more and more of that stuff. Again, it brings up the whole issue of the security of that data. So sensors are going to be an incredible boom in terms of how we live and new industries and reinventing old industries like a healthcare industry. Happens to be the U.S.'s largest industry, and it's probably at least a decade, maybe more, behind every other industry, large industry that's adapted to digital technology. And yet, we are clearly going to be dealing with problems that are immense from a security standpoint. So if as a society we don't figure out how to deal with social media, which in my opinion is basically putting democracy to the test of can it survive? And then the question is, what do we do, and how do we probably regulate it, and how do we regulate it, and how does that work its way through special interest groups? Well, if we don't figure out what, in hindsight of maybe 10 or 15 years from now, will seem like a relatively simple problem. Imagine the problem we're going to have to deal with sensors and massive amounts of artificial intelligence and machine learning able to do things with that sensor data, and how do we deal with the societal issues of that in a democracy? We're at the beginning. We're not at a point where we're saying, wow, look what's happened to the world, how do we fix it? We're just at the beginning of what things we're going to have to be able to deal with that are on a scale well beyond most people's imagination. And a lot of it goes right back to sensors, David.
Well, handled a lot there, a lot of topics. When I was on CNBC this morning, I was specifically talking about the evolution of artificial intelligence and the launch of this conference. And, excuse me, as I was talking about it, I was talking about how multiple disparate technologies come together, because today, one of the biggest problems with sensors is you have to be really close to them to read them, right? So the concept of putting a sensor into a product on a factory floor in China and being able to follow that product onto the pallet, into the container, onto the ship, to the United States, at the dock, off the ship, into the truck, from the truck to the warehouse, from the warehouse to the consumer, and then having other sensors in the home that can then see when you're running out of things and begin to keep you freshly stocked with the things that you need. I see sort of some of the low Earth satellite systems that we're putting in are going to be very meaningful there, because it doesn't matter if it's 5G or 6G, it doesn't work in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, at least not yet. Whereas what Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and others are putting into the sky, and Facebook are putting into the sky, trying to build low orbit satellite systems to be able to do that, right? So if you think about that evolution, one of the things we're already doing at Zeta, not quite that, but we've begun to integrate our clients' inventory into their marketing platform. So today, I'm going to pivot a little bit. When we think about the holiday season, what's the worst thing you can do if you're a brand? You can, in my opinion, sell somebody a product, tell them it's going to be there by Christmas, and then not have it there remotely by Christmas, right? I mean, listen, we're as you like to say, we're not curing cancer here. We're trying to build a better marketing platform, but that for a brand could be incredibly detrimental, right? When we look at it at Zeta, the ability to say, okay, this is not in stock, you better pivot your marketing to another product, and or start in the discovery process where somebody's going into a search bar and saying, this is the product I want. Well, our platform can now say, you don't have that product, but here are 2 or 3 products just like it. What are examples of what marketers can do as they think about, we're going into the holiday season, and unlike most prior holiday seasons, marketers who put their entire marketing on sort of auto drive from October on are going to have major challenges as they deal with the supply chain. First of all, in your career, have you seen a supply chain disruption like this? And if you have, how did it work around it? And if you haven't, what are your recommendations to marketers who are dealing with it today?
Well, that's a lot of questions.
Well, you know, you gave me like 37 answers, starting with healthcare and ending with Facebook's taking over the world.
And I'm going to give you and everyone some ideas of how to think about them. First of all, Elon Musk has said on several occasions he believes that SpaceX will be much more valuable than Tesla.
That's saying something at $1.3 trillion.
Yeah, and he hasn't been wrong yet.
That's true.
So he is putting up literally thousands and thousands of these low Earth orbit satellites, which we're going to need, you know, if the sensors live up to the conversation we have here, and if we have a chance of solving some of the supply chain problems. But the model you described, David, is the model that we are all familiar with today, which is you produce something at a low cost, you know, place of competence. Let's say it's in Vietnam or China or somewhere else, and then it goes through a supply chain and eventually finds its way over here. But if you step out a few more decades, the supply chain may look entirely different for many, many different products. It's going to be called 3D on-demand printing. And you'll say, well, how in the world can you possibly print at scale 3D demand printing? And maybe you can't for everything, but we'll probably find ways to reimagine what gets done where in the supply chain. We look at the incredible bottleneck we have in the Port of Los Angeles now, with no easy solution. They need another 80,000 truck drivers. The average truck driver makes $47,000 a year. We have 4 million people who decided during the pandemic that they don't like their jobs and they quit. On the other hand, we have 14 million open jobs, high-skilled jobs, that can't be filled because we don't have the skills to match up to the jobs. So when you have those kinds of disoriented situations, it opens up smart people to figure out ways to do adaptive innovation. And so I suspect that not only is one of the outcomes from the pandemic the reinvention of work. Not everybody can have their job reinvented, but a lot of people can have their jobs reinvented, or they can certainly reinvent where they perform their jobs. But this was just a teaser for us of what's to come. And you start to factor in what that means for digital marketing, because those 4 million people aren't necessarily going to stay out of the workforce. Most of them are going to try to find ways to get back into the workforce, but they want to find better jobs than the ones that they left. They may have been laid off, if they were in the airline industry or if they were in hospitality. But the reality is a lot of those people who could come back for those jobs don't want to come back to those jobs. And so I suspect that we're still sort of discovering what the way people will work between those who want to work and who want to work in maybe a different way or want to spend less time going to a place of work. We'll know much better by the end of this decade what it's going to be like. And for digital marketers, the outcome of that has incredible implications.
How so?
Well, first of all, let's go out to the end of this decade. What are we going to be carrying around? Are we going to be carrying around a smartphone? Or are we going to be carrying around something else? My sense is the smartphone is not going away. But just to give you an idea of it, when Steve Jobs in 2007 introduced the first iPhone, and you look at the iPhone that's available today, it's approximately 1 billion times more powerful. The current iPhone 13 is able to process not only with its M1 microprocessor, but then with its what are called the glue chips around it. It's up to over a trillion transactions a second. In fact, in some instances, it's in close to 10 trillion transactions a second.
I wish the spell check worked better.
So the point is, there's not going to be any slowdown of this technology. The smartphone is really a supercomputer in the context of just a few years ago, and it's going to be able to do more and more. But what does it still lack? It's much better at processing data inside of itself than it is communicating that data efficiently where you want it, at the speed that you want. And it's still, we're in the early days of what cloud computing will be. So we started first with, like AWS and then Microsoft Azure and a few others. But that's just the beginning of cloud computing. I mean, that's just a massive storehouse we say the sky, the cloud is, as you know, it's not actually up there. You know, the cloud is down here.
John, we tell all our clients it's up there. Our cloud's up here.
Well, you can blame that on AT&T. They created the words cloud,
Yeah.
you know, about 40 years ago, and it's kind of stuck. People just assume the cloud is up there. But we're getting into the hybrid cloud. We're getting into how do you keep what data where? How do you move it fast enough? Storage is no longer a high cost anymore. I mean, storage, in many cases, is given away for free. Google gives the storage away for free for many purposes. You know, why? Because they want your data.
Of course.
You know, of course. So, as a digital marketer, you need to be aware of that we are in the very, very early days of what digital marketing technology will be capable of doing before the end of this decade.
So John, I read the other day, which I don't know why it shocks me, but it continues to shock me. I think there were approximately 66 years between when Orville and Wilbur Wright did their flight and the day that man stepped on the moon, which coincidentally was my and Anthony and Brendan and Craig's birthday. Well, Anthony and my exact birthday, but Brendan and Craig were born on the same day, but many, many years later. But 66 years from Orville and Wilbur Wright to man walking on the moon.
Yeah.
Go out 66 years from now. Does a phone exist? Is it all augmented reality? Where leap ahead. Forget about 3 years. 66 years from now, in the last 3 minutes and 46 seconds, where do you think we are, marketing-wise?
Well, marketing-wise, we're going to experience augmented reality long before we experience virtual reality.
Sure.
So I think Mark Zuckerberg got a little ahead of himself. You know, and Diane and I saw the first Oculus when the founder hadn't even sold the company to Facebook, and a good friend of mine, Gary Marcus, wrote the first demo app on it, and we have Oculus, and Diane, being a real geek, you know, uses it all the time. And my sense is that's not going to happen anytime soon. Yes, there'll be devices. I mean, we've used Oculus. It's pretty good what it does, but compare that with the technology that will be at scale for augmented reality by the end of this decade versus the technology that will be at scale for virtual reality. I suspect that augmented reality will be, you know, quite a bit ahead. It doesn't mean that virtual reality won't come. It's just much more complicated problem to solve. I think that augmented reality will have a big impact on digital marketing. It'll have it before this decade is over. And you know, no big company likes to talk about whether they're making anything in it, but you know, we all know there's a lot going on in terms of technology for augmented reality. And so it's going to have to be factored in. So what will we see it on? Well, yes, we'll see it probably on, you know, some type of, you know, glasses, and it will be better in 2040 than it will be in 2030. But things always, you know, follow a progression. But I think that augmented reality doesn't always require a special device. Maybe it'll be a hologram that's used with a projection. Maybe it'll be on
Minority Report.
Yeah, Minority Report. I mean, it may actually be on big screens like we've, you know, have around this you know, Zeta Live convention today. So big screens, by the way, aren't going away.
No.
You know, we'll just be able to do more things with them. So when we talk about CTV, Connected TV, it is absolutely going to be a big deal in digital marketing.
Well, considering our CTV business grew 499%.
Yeah. And you know, it's going to continue to grow. And I think even by the end of this decade, that you know, CTV will be far more mainstream than any type of new device, even the new augmented reality devices or the virtual reality devices, just because it's cheap, hardware-wise. It's all the other infrastructure issues are being dealt with, whether it's done with satellites or whether it's
you can get
done in other ways.
get an Amazon Fire Stick for $39 and be in the CTV ecosystem.
Yeah. So I think, you know, cable will essentially be gone. I mean, already 70% the population are cable cutters, or never got into it.
Well, that'll also accelerate when the low Earth satellite systems can deliver the high-speed access to the home.
That's absolutely right.
Because that's, even guys who are cord cutting still need internet access, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting that from the local providers. That ultimately goes away.
Yeah.
John, one projection. We have 20 seconds. 66 years from now, what is one crazy thing that's going to happen?
The biggest question in my mind for 66 years from now is, does democracy survive technology innovation?
Way to end on a high note.